actually hoping to bring in a drum group today, but I guess probably wouldn't have worked out with the size of the room.
Well, they're all at the island right now.
Yeah,
they're hanging right now there.
Do you know them, O-Town Boys?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to Greg. Just trying to bring him in.
I was there because we all started singing again at Wabano like 2 years ago, and we built the drum there, and that one broke, so we were building another one, but it was fun when we first started out.
Sweet. So you know how to sing?
Yeah.
Really? How do you learn?
Just life.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
I always wanted to learn.
Since I was a kid.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know how you guys do it.
I used to be I used to be a dancer.
What did you dance?
Huh?
What did you dance?
Traditional. Yeah. Probably get back into it.
I've been singing that for 5 years.
Oh, yeah?
About 5 years.
I don't do it traditional.
Cool. Do you guys know David Charette?
Yeah. It's close buddy of mine.
Okay. He's pretty. Seen his cousin or friends of mine.
Yeah. I travel with him lots in the summer.
It's a pretty awesome addition.
I know, I'm just so proud of myself. I didn't know I was going to get you to but that's okay. It's because we were just chilling and speaking. So.
In the photo?
No, like the quotes.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's because, you know, it was just like, you know, talk to me about it more. I'm like, wow. And like,
Alright, I guess we can get started. Okay, so, hello, my name is Shady in my language, or Ash Courchene, it's my English name. First of all, I guess I want to thank you for coming, and also OPIRG-Carleton, especially Hafez and Andy, who I kind of got in contact with. I had this idea of starting a teach-in, and they kind of implemented it, so I just kind of like along for the ride, I guess. Yeah, I heard about I Don't Know More, I don't know, during the Christmas holidays, and I quickly followed it, and the more I read about it, the more I wanted to get involved, so this is kind of like one of the outcomes of doing that. For anybody that doesn't know, pretty sure everybody knows, I just want to quickly go through what I Don't Know More is. It's first of all, it started out with 4 women who brought the Omnibus Bill C-45 to the spotlight, and from there it's kind of grown into big grassroots movement, and it seems now that it's picked up momentum, people are kind of finding their own issues with the injustices of what's happening, especially First Nations rights and the attack on the environment and so forth and so on. So for the people that say that I Don't Know More is unorganized, I say, you know, it's a good thing that can be expected from a grassroots movement, because it allows for multiple issues to be recognized, brought up by people who have to live with these issues on a daily basis. And I think the I Don't Know More movement is important because it does that. It brings truth to Canadian history, for one, and it opens up the eyes to Canadians of what's going on with what Harper is planning, you know, behind the scenes, I guess, and also the unfair and unjust treatment of First Nations people, its culture, and the environment throughout the history. So, with that, there is 2 speakers here today. One of them is Shady, Hafez, sorry, who is on the Aboriginal Service Center, and he is going to speak about the different bills and different legislation and how it affects First Nations people and Canadians, and also Gabrielle, sitting right here. She's on the First People's Council, and she is speaking about I Don't Know More Carleton University student movement, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. So with that, I'll. Who wants to go first?
Well, so everyone here knows what Idle No More is. Actually, I'll introduce myself. My name's Shady. I'm a student here. I'm half Algonquin from Castilloux. My mom's from there, lives there, and my father's Syrian, so I'm kind of screwed on both sides, but privileged on both sides also. But what I'm going to talk to you guys about is some of the specific legislation that is affecting First Nations people, which is pretty much why Idle No More began as new legislation. Is there anybody here that doesn't know what it is?
Feel free to.
Not 100% familiar with all of it.
Can someone pass me on what legislation, please?
Basically, it was for women from Manitoba Manitoba's just country. Manitoba. I think it was Manitoba. And basically, they started this, and it happened. I guess the movement really started to pick up just after the Chiefs kind of went inside Parliament Hill during the AFN Special Chiefs Assembly. So what I'm going to do is go over the different bills. So beginning with the one you hear most about, which I really don't think is the most devastating bill to us. I mean, you hear a lot about Bill C-45, Bill C-45, but really it's in comparison to the rest of the bills that they're trying to pass, I feel like it's really light in comparison to the other ones, which aren't talked about that much. So the two things that First Nations people and Idle No More is fighting against in Bill C-45 is first off the Navigable Waters Act, which removes protection from a lot of lakes, rivers, and creeks. The old law prior to this was that if your canoe was big enough to float, if the lake or river or creek was big enough for your canoe to float in it, that had to be protected. Now that's changed. I don't know specifically what's changed, but it went from environmental assessment needed when you build next to a lake, river, creek, 32,000 rivers, creeks, lakes to just 97 lakes, 2.25 million to just 62 rivers. I mean, you can see that the protection dropped from a lot of lakes and rivers. So, a couple issues with that. First off, First Nations people, we don't consider this our land necessarily. That's not our traditional teachings. It's everybody's land. But we, as First Nations people, have a duty to protect that land. That is across the board. I mean, we're all distinct cultures, but spiritually and traditionally, we all have that common teaching that we are supposed to be caretakers and protectors of the land. So that's, obviously that's going to bug us when, these laws are being passed. It's going to expose the environment to things that are negative to them. Secondly, the federal government has a duty to consult. They have a legal obligation to speak to First Nations people when, what was that?
Sorry, that's in my phone.
Oh,
Oh, that's my computer
when,
opening a tweet.
yeah. When the federal government wants to implement laws that are going to affect land within First Nations traditional territory, land claim territory, reserve territory, which is pretty much 99% of Canada, they have to consult First Nations people. It's a law, it was passed by the Supreme Court, they have to do it. What that means though is, I mean, I could talk to you, you're First Nation, I just consulted. Do you approve that I build this oil mine right next to this lake or river? Sure, okay, cool, I just consulted First Nations people. Exactly, that's a lot, and the federal government does do that, the corporations do that. So, there's no consultation with that. Now, the second part of Bill C-45 is that affects First Nations people is the amendment to the Indian Act that changes the land management policy on reserve. So basically, prior to this law being made, if a First Nation wanted to sell or relinquish land title, let's say they wanted to give up some of their land and maybe rent it off to a community, not community, municipality, or the federal government wants to put a corporation on that land. They offer up some money to buy it, and the community wants to decide to buy it. Before, they needed 51% approval of every person in that community. So let's say we're all community members here, we all have to vote, and the majority of us has to vote that the land gets let out. However, with this amendment, whoever is, an election notice will be called, and whoever is there that day gets to decide on the land and how it's sold. So let's say we're all community members here, we put up an election notice on the front door, 3 of you show up and 2 vote to sell the land sold, which makes it easier for, and see this is what I don't know more looks at the exterior problems and the internal problems, because some chiefs did ask for this. Some communities did ask for this, and not necessarily what the government gave them, but they did ask for an easier ability to sell land. You know, to be able to control their own land. They wanted it to be easier for them to do it, because not only do they have to have approval of every community member, they also had to have approval of the Minister of Indian Affairs. After the vote was done, he gets a paper. He has to say, okay, I approve this or I don't approve this, and it would take years to sell, you know, a little piece of land, which sometimes it's negative or positive. You know, if the community can you know, create some kind of economic development from selling that land, it can be positive. But at the same time, if you're gonna have corporations coming in and, you know, tearing up the land, it can be negative. But that's, you know, it makes it easier, and you can obviously see with Harper's agenda, with the economic development of Canada, why this would be positive for the federal government, for corporations to come in, buy land, you know, offer up some good money, some short-term money to communities that really need the money, and they sell off their land really easily, which it can be scary. So that's Bill C-45, and so like I said, for me personally, in my opinion, I don't find it's the scariest law out there right now affecting us. Bill C-27, the First Nations Financial Transparency Act. This is another bill that was pushed by the chiefs. A lot of chiefs wanted this bill out there. They didn't want what was given to them though. See, the government took they sat down with chiefs, they got recommendations from them, and then they released all these bills and said, here, this is what we're going to give you. And it all looked really nice because the titles were nice and they said them in really nice ways to the chiefs and the communities, but then you read the fine print and you're like, oh, this is not cool. So, Financial Transparency Act sounds really good. First Nations communities should be transparent. You know, there's not a community out there that's going to say we don't want to be transparent with anybody. Who's going to say that? But what the problem is here is that communities are already transparent and they're already accountable. There's a myth out there that communities are just spending. Well, not necessarily a myth. Some communities do. There are communities out there that mismanage money, just like there's cities and there's provinces and there's countries that mismanage money. We're human beings just like everybody else, and sometimes mistakes are made. It's not every community that's doing that. It's not the majority of communities that are doing that either. However, every year, First Nation communities send out an audited financial report to Aboriginal Affairs, which is then scrutinized by Aboriginal Affairs, and if everything's in check, then they get their funding for the next fiscal year. If everything is not in check, they don't get their funding, and a third-party manager will be sent in to deal with that community, like what happened in Hafez. Now, I don't know what, it doesn't really say exactly what they want more than what we're already giving them. Which is just, it seems like they're just racially stereotyping us, as in, we're going to put more transparency laws on you, more accountability laws on you, even though you guys are already transparent and accountable. So it doesn't make sense. And they don't put these laws on municipalities, they don't put these laws on provinces, and they don't put these laws on territories. They don't have to release financial statements to the federal government, but First Nations do, even though provinces, territories, and cities do receive monies from the federal government. So why are we being held accountable so much when everyone else is being let off the hook? And cities, provinces, and municipalities, territories, they all mismanage money also. So I don't know why they're being let off the hook, and we're being, there's a double standard when it comes to First Nations people and money, basically. And you know, I understand people have to go back to the taxpayer and tell them where the money's going, but it's not necessarily, there's a myth out there too that the taxpayer is paying for First Nations people. That's not necessarily true. First Nations people do have investments and trust funds and money that they create and they generate, but any money made on the reserve has to go back to Aboriginal Affairs, but then they bank it up, decide where it's going to go, and divvy it back to us. So our money's not even our money in the end. It has to go back to Aboriginal Affairs, and they give it back to us, and they claim that it's taxpayers' money. Get everyone in Canada riled up against us, and next thing you know, we're lazy Indians who mismanage money and take taxpayers' money for free and get free this and free that and free this and free that. So that's, you know, a big misconception right there. So that's the Financial Transparency Act. Next one is the First Nations Private Property Ownership Act. I don't know much about this act, to be honest with you, but what I do know is that First Nations people don't believe in private property. It's a colonial mindset that you can impose your beliefs on another group of people. We don't believe in I own this section, you own that section, you own that section. If you step on my land, I'll sue you, I'll take you to court. We don't believe in that. That's not our traditional mentality, not our spiritual mentality, it's not our culture. We never had that concept of private property. We had concepts of territories, and you know, different nations have a specific territory, and that was dealt with culture, spirituality, religion, hunting issues, but it was never I own this territory. So when the government is trying to impose First Nations private property ownership acts on reserve to better our lives, and that's what is crazy about all these laws, is they're all done to better our lives. People who aren't First Nations are coming up with laws to better First Nations people's lives. What do they know about First Nations people? They don't squat half the time. They haven't been in communities. They don't talk to First Nations people. They don't consult First Nations people. They aren't First Nations people, and that's the main thing. They are not First Nations people. They don't understand the culture, the traditions, or the spirituality. So it's a huge colonizer mentality that because, excuse my language here, but because they are Caucasian, they know what is best for the sad savage, if I have to say. You know, they know what's best for us. We can't help ourselves. They have to help us. It's like our fathers and our mothers. They have to take care of us. First Nations people should be creating our own legislation. We shouldn't have legislation imposed upon us. So the next one, there's a couple, sorry. Bill S2, the Family Homes on Reserve and Matrimonial Interests or Rights Act.
There's a lot of
Yeah,
bills.
and if I talk too fast or if I mumble, because I do that sometimes, tell me and I'll repeat it. So right now, there's not really any laws on reserve that have that deal with family rights, property when a divorce happens, or you know, family law basically doesn't really exist on reserve unless a community makes a bylaw, and the bylaws aren't really, I mean, it's not as enforceable as a provincial law or a federal law. So what, and this law also was pushed on by a lot of like Sisters in Spirit. Those kind of organizations push for things for women to have equal rights as men on reserve when it came to property ownership and divorce. But again, they didn't ask for this, which is what came out. And it's tough to scrutinize this law because there's a lot of sensitive issues around family ownership and, you know, domestic issues at home and when that happens. But basically, this law is opening up the possibility for people who aren't First Nations to own property on reserve, which then contradicts the Indian Act, because the Indian Act has a part in it that is the trespassing part. So if you're First Nations and you own property on reserve, or if you're not First Nations and you own property on reserve, you're trespassing. You can be fined or go sent to jail if you like own a house on reserve and you're not from that reserve or from that community. So what this family homes on reserve does, let's say I'm married to a woman who's not First Nations, or I'm common law, or you know, and we have issues, we're getting separated or divorced. What it does now is because she can't own property on reserve, but a provincial judge can make an order for me to be removed from my home without the court proceedings even have happened yet, and give her complete ownership of the house. And if that keeps happening, continually happening, because First Nations people don't just mix with First Nations people, we mix with a lot of other people, you're going to end up having a lot of ownership of homes on reserve by people who aren't First Nations people. Not only that is you're having provincial laws being imposed on reserve. Provincial laws have nothing to do with First Nations communities, and they should not be imposed on reserve. If the federal government wants us to have matrimonial laws on reserve, we should be creating them ourselves, not having provincial laws imposed on us, because we never signed no agreements with provinces. We didn't sign, the Royal Proclamation was not involved with provinces. The Indian Act was not involved in provinces. The federal government took the jurisdiction to take care of us. Sorry, I don't like saying that word. But they have jurisdiction legally over First Nations people. And now they're trying to hand off that jurisdiction to the provinces, which really don't want to deal with us either. So they're going to, and a lot of these bills are trying to push provincial laws onto reserve, which is just going to make a bigger mess because the provinces really don't want to deal with us. The federal government doesn't want the responsibility anymore, let alone the provinces. They have enough responsibilities than to add First Nations onto their list. So we're going to be fighting with the feds, and now we're going to be fighting with the provinces, which is going to create a whole big mess. But that's Bill S2. I heard that comment before that it's going to create checkerboard reserves, where you're going to have basically, you don't know where the reserve ends and where it begins, because you're going to have homes that are owned by people who are First Nations, not First Nations, First Nations, not First Nations, and mixed up on the reserve. And then, I mean, you might as well just get rid of the whole reserve system if you're going to put this law into place. Bill S6, First Nations Election Act. Sorry. This one just creates more legislation on how we vote for our leaders, for our chiefs in our communities, which is, I disagree with the Indian Act system of how we vote for our leaders. Some nations, some communities weren't necessarily democratic, you know, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either. Some communities had a system of how they ran their governments and how chiefs and leaders were elected, and how they had, you know, even if it wasn't one person, it was a council of people running the community. And this system is just another way that the feds are imposing their laws on First Nations people. You know, and it creates division in communities. Some communities want that traditional system back, like the Nganawage, Akwesasne. They want their traditional system back, their longhouse way of governing their people. You know, a women's council picks a leader. You know, people vote also for that leader. That's how they want it back, and they're clashing with Indian Act chiefs in communities. There's been civil wars in communities, like in Akwesasne, like in Ganawage, where Indian Act chiefs are, let's say, pro-gambling, pro-casino, and the traditional chief and the longhouse chief doesn't want that. And in Akwesasne, they had a civil war, and it was violent. And in Rapid Lake, Barrier Lake, they had that same issue where hereditary chief the people wanted him to be in power, and the Indian Act chief and his supporters wanted him in power, and they end up clashing and fighting. And it's that colonized mentality that the government put into us, is that we have to do things like they do things. We have to be proper. If we follow the Indian Act and we vote the way they want us to vote, we're civilized Indians. But if we have hereditary chiefs and councils and stuff like that, we're still savages. And one scary thing about this is this allows the minister to impose election processes on First Nations. So I'm not quite sure what it changes, because he already has that ability. The minister right now, he gets a paper saying, let's say for my community, Kilegan Zibi has elected Gilbert White Duck to be the chief of the community. Do you approve or not approve? And he can write, no, I don't approve of that, send it back, have another election. Which is like, what's the point of democracy if you're just going to say, no, I don't like that guy, I want him out. It doesn't make any sense. This is my favorite one, because it sounds so nice, and it took me a few reads to finally what's wrong with this bill? Why are people pissed off about this? I couldn't get it, and a lot of these I didn't get. When I first read them, I was like, cool, the government's actually doing stuff to help us out and be nice and be cool. And then I read into them, I was like, yeah. And I even posted on Facebook. I was like, what's everyone so mad about? Like, I was just looking over these bills, and they seemed really nice. And then people were like, keep reading, don't speak too soon. And I kept reading, and now my mind's been like complete 360. So Bill S8, the Safe Drinking Water for First Nations Act. Sounds awesome. Like, the federal government's basically saying, yes, we agree, First Nations people should have safe drinking water. We totally support you guys. We totally, we agree. Everybody should have safe drinking water in Canada, which is great that the federal government is finally starting to say that we should all be equal and have safe drinking water. But what they're doing is they're saying, okay, so federal government doesn't have jurisdiction over water, pipelines, all that kind of stuff. That's a provincial matter. So we're just not going to deal with it. We're going to give it to your community, your First Nation. You deal with that. We're going to give you that portfolio. But we're not going to give you any extra money. We're not going to give you any extra training. We're not going to teach you guys how to run water systems under your community. And if you mess it up, we're going to come in and post third-party management, do it for you, and if we screw up, we remove ourselves from any type of legal liability if any people die from any kind of outbreaks in the water or anything like that. So it sounds good, you know, they're giving us the ability to do what we want, but you can't do it for free. You can't create water systems for free. And the money we get already isn't enough to create half the stuff we need, let alone working water systems in communities, you know. This would be fine if they gave us extra money and, you know, extra training and sent in people to, you know, teach how to run those systems under the ground, you know, how to create water treatment facilities. But they're just saying, here you go, take it. Like to a community like Wapiskat, you know, they have what is it, just over 1,000 members. You know, you need to send extra money and extra training and extra people to show people in that community how to run systems like this. You know, I'm sure not every person in that community is an expert on how to run a water treatment facility. So it doesn't make sense at all that they're doing this without sending any extra type of funding. So I find it funny that they call it safe drinking water for First Nations. All it is they're saying that we support that everyone should have safe drinking water, but we're not going to put any action behind those words aside from just giving you guys responsibility for it. And if you mess it up, we're going to come in and put a third-party manager and show the rest of the world that you guys don't know how to take care of yourselves, again, like they always do. So there's one on here that I know well. The other two, Bill S-207, an act to amend the Interpretation Act, I'm not very clear on myself. I haven't read too much about it. And Bill S-212, First Nation Self-Government Recognition Bill. It's been the 4th time it's gone through. It kind of supports First Nation self-government and it kind of doesn't. You can't have self-government in a day without any, like, what they're basically saying, we want self-government, but we can't have that without economic development. You can't create a country without money. You need money, unfortunately. And not a country, sorry, I'm not trying to say we want to separate, but some people do, not me, but what's that?
It's a word that leave us.
Leave us.
Our country separated. Only Native people could stay here and leave us.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's an illogic argument. We have to split our bodies.
Basically, let's say you give First Nations people the right to self-govern. Right now, immediately today, the government signs this paper. You guys have freedom to control your health care, your child protection, wildlife, fisheries, habitat management, education, everything that provinces control, you now have the power to control yourself. So you guys can do everything you want to do. But we're not going to give you access to the De Beers mine that is a meter away from your reserve. We're not going to give you access to anything, any kind of natural resources where you can make any sort of income into your community, to build infrastructure, to build hospitals, to build police stations, to build all those types of things that you need money for. Because, I mean, you can tax a community of 1,000 people, 90% of their income, you're still not going to have enough money to take care of that community. So they need access to some sort of economy, and the government just doesn't want to give that up. And if they do want to give it up, they're not giving up much. They're not giving up as much as First Nations people deserve and need to sustain their economies. Because, in southern communities it might work where you can develop, I don't like to say it, but there's like sin business, like casinos and stuff that some communities do very well on. But in the north, I mean, again, I'll use Wapiskat for example. Their only economy they can really rely on is natural resources. And that's not to say that they're going to tear apart the land and do what, non-First Nations corporations do half the time. But when you look at examples of First Nations corporations, they have done stuff in respect to the land. So they're creating economic development, using the environment, but they're doing it in a sustainable fashion. So if First Nations people had access to those resources that are on their land, you know, we could have self-government within, I don't know, I would argue like 50 years. You know, we could be self-sustainable, but they don't want to give that to us. And the last one I'll talk about, Bill C-428, Indian Act Amendment and Replacement. This one's another one of my favorites too, because there's no consultation at all. You want to take out the Indian Act, amend it, replace it, whatever they want to do with it, but they don't want to consult us about what's going to come afterwards. And they're just saying, this is what we want to do, and we're going to do it. And you know, most of these bills are going to pass. They have majorities, so they're gonna pass. Just like Bill C-45, there wasn't much discussion about it, you know, and it passed. You know, all these they're gonna go through. Now, this Indian Act Amendment and Replacement Act. The Indian Act is a racist piece of legislation. It sucks. I hate it. I don't want it there. But something's got to replace it. And First Nations people have to decide what replaces that Indian Act. We want equal rights as the rest of Canada. We want equality, but at the same time, there is special rights that are guaranteed to First Nations people, not because we're First Nations people and we're cool and special like that, but because the federal government signed treaties with us. They signed agreements with us. I signed a contract with Bell. I can't just cut out of that contract without paying something into it. You know, same thing with the government. They sign agreements with us. They sign contracts with us. They have to honor those agreements, and they're the ones that put the words in till the as long as the grass grows and the river flows and the sun shines. They put that in there. We didn't put that in there. They put that nice language in there. Thank you to the British government who added that in there, or else, you know, they could break their agreements and their contracts. But so like I said, we do want equality, but at the same time there has to be respect for special status and special rights, because there are agreements that are signed. So you can't just get rid of the Indian Act and First Nations people then become just like every other person in Canada, because, again, like I said, there has to be respect for the treaties. So what I argue is that if you are going to amend or replace the Indian Act, you have to consult First Nations people, and the consultation has to be, a good example is when they wanted to build the Mackenzie pipeline, like, I think it was like 30 years ago in the 80s. They sent I forget his name, if anyone knows it, the Berger Commission. They sent him in, and he talked to people, he lived with people, he communicated with people. He didn't just go sit with a bunch of chiefs in the office where nobody else can go in there, and all those chiefs have reserves who are really well off, who are probably part of exploiting some of the environment, and sat with them and said, "What, you know, we're going to build this mine here, what do you think?" They said, "Sure." But no, he went with the grassroots people, he also went with the leaders, he went with everybody, and he sat with them and he learned with them. He took his family with him, and his family sat with First Nations families, you know. His wife talked to the First Nations women and learned from them certain things about what they want. And from that, the Mackenzie pipeline was not built. And they put a hold on pipelines actually in that area for a long time. You know, so that's to me what consultation means. If they want to change the Indian Act, they need to be in all the communities, sitting with people, talking with people. It's going to affect. And you know, that's what Idle No More is about. It's grassroots people. It's people saying, where is our consultation? Why aren't you talking to us? We're only 1 million so people in Canada. We're not, you know, in comparison to the rest of Canada, we're not that much people. You can send people to communities to sit down and spend a month or two with us and talk to us and learn from us and understand what we want. You know, and we also have our own laws. There's indigenous laws, and the government should be looking into those also and saying, you know, maybe they want to run their communities how they want to run it. They have their own laws, their own traditions, and their own culture.
Legally, indigenous laws is recognized by Canadian court. There's 3 codes of laws: British Commonwealth, the French Civil, and indigenous laws.
Sorry, what's my time? How long have I been going for? Half an hour? Okay, so I'll just go for a little bit and then I'll pass it over to you. Okay. Does that make you?
No, that's me getting, I'm getting tweets.
So,
no, literally, I'm getting a tweet. That's the little birdie sound.
for me personally, And I don't like to talk generally about the whole movement. I like to talk about my own feelings regarding it. I think what I don't know more means to me is that there needs to be consultation. We need to be talked to by the federal government. This whole mentality of we know what's best for you because we're wearing suits and we're in Parliament Hill and we get paid the big bucks needs to go. I mean, you don't know what's best for us. The federal government does not know, and their track record does not show that they know what's best for us. Their track record, their history from 1867 till now is not a good history, and even prior to that. So all the time that they've been thinking they know what's going to do good for us and make us better people, make us successful, and create sustainability in our communities, it hasn't worked. The whole protection, civilization, assimilation, all those policies that the government has had doesn't work. They thought residential schools was the beneficial thing for us. It obviously wasn't. They thought reserves was going to benefit us. It obviously didn't. They thought farming was going to make us just like them, and we would be, within a couple of years, we would be just like white people, and we would be wearing suits and farming and plowing, living in cities and stuff like that. It obviously doesn't work. So their strategy, the government does not learn from their mistakes. Which I think 2013 we should start looking back in history and saying, what are we doing wrong here? And for me, what they're doing wrong is there's still that mentality that they are superior to First Nations people and that they know what is best for us. And I also think I don't know more means looking inside. So looking at our own people and our own communities and seeing what we're contributing to this mess, because we are contributing somewhat to it. There is a division in communities right now, and I don't know more is making that gap a bit bigger, which I think is a good thing, because for a long time I spoke against the AFN chiefs and the Indian Act chiefs, and I would get attacked because of that, because I wasn't supporting our people, I wasn't supporting our leaders. And now people are starting to see some of those leaders' true colors. They're trying to see how people are behaving and acting, which I think is good. But we need to also, as First Nations people, look inside to our own communities and ourselves get rid of, when we see corruption, we need to get rid of it. When we see a chief not being accountable, we need to put that person on trial, not the federal government. We need to be saying, you're doing this wrong and you're hurting our people. When we see, poverty, at the same time, it does require money, but we need to get up and fix that poverty sometimes. And I think I don't know more is doing a good job of waking people up to seeing what's wrong on the outside and what's wrong on the inside, which is really good. One more thing too, as for allies of I don't know more, I don't know more needs supporters, because we're a minority in Canada. We don't have very many people. I mean, we can protest or blue in the face, but without many people, we're not going to get much change. Allies are always good, but the one thing that I believe, one thing that I've seen actually with I don't know more that kind of upsets me is like a hostile takeover of the movement by organizations who are kind of using it as like a piggyback. Yeah, to push their own political agenda. And it's not just allies, it's our own people too. I mean, Indian Act chiefs have suddenly jumped on the band. At first they were opposed to it, now they're like, and jump on it, and promote my own political agenda. And I think that for anyone who's an ally, it's good to remember that, yes, it's a grassroots movement, yes, it doesn't have organization, but it does have a clear message and a goal, and that shouldn't be clouded by other messages and goals. Let's say, unions, student movement, stuff like that, Occupy, those are all great movements, but it's not necessarily I don't know more. Just like I don't know more, or just like, they're not necessarily interchangeable. They are different things. And I think that it's just a message out there to supporters too. If you're gonna support I don't know more, support I don't know more. If you're gonna support Occupy, support Occupy. But don't use them as like a catalyst to push the other one out. That's just one thing I've noticed that's been happening. I've experienced it and I didn't like it. But that's just my opinion. You can agree or disagree with that. And I think that's any questions?
No, just a comment that I remember taking high school law courses. They mentioned common law and they mentioned, oh well, Quebec has civil law, but we don't live in Quebec, and they didn't even mention reserve and Aboriginal law at all. Indigenous law, rather.
Well, in the Royal Proclamation, the Royal Proclamation basically, I didn't really go over that either since I talked about treaties. Everyone knows what the Royal Proclamation is?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, well, it's an assertion of our sovereignty, and as sovereign people in this country, our laws should be respected and are respected. The one thing that I love about the Royal Proclamation is that the government always tries to use the excuse of, well, it's just legislation that we passed. It wasn't a treaty. You guys didn't sign it, you know. You had nothing to do with the Royal Proclamation. We can change it whatever we want. But the fact is, at the Treaty of Niagara, they brought the Royal Proclamation there for approval by First Nations chiefs. All the chiefs. There was thousands of people there at the Treaty of Niagara in, I don't remember the date. It was a couple hundred years ago, I think, by now. But they, yeah, 1700s, I think. Yeah.
We just finished
we just finished the class
together.
But basically the Royal Proclamation was the assertion of our own sovereignty, and they had to bring it. We had so much power at that time that they had to bring it to us to approve it. To say, what do you guys think about this? Can we use this? And we're like, yeah, sure, as long as we're, you know. 1763. As long as, and that's where a lot of the wampum belts were brought to also, and treaties were made like that, like the 2-row wampum. You know, so it just shows you that First Nations, the power that First Nations had at that time directly influenced a lot of this legislation. You know, when Canadians now try and say, oh, you know, we won the war, we took over the land, you have to live the way we want you to live, or, you know, you gave up your land when you signed treaties. It wasn't a giving up of land, but the way I like to say it is a lot of other places that were colonized didn't see it coming. It came so fast, and now they're in a position where they don't get any benefits from it. They don't get, you know, what's taken care of because, let's say, they ceded land. But the way I like to look at it is that, you know, we kind of saw it coming. We saw the tides coming, and before we would just get, you know, completely annihilated, we made sure we had our generations covered, our bases covered by signing agreements, by you know, kind of using their own mindsets against them, by saying, okay, fine, you want this land, sign this piece of paper and guarantee this for me and all my grandchildren and all my great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren. So that's it's that you have to, if you're gonna respect and follow Item Lamore, you have to respect and believe that First Nations are sovereign people, and that, you know, yes, land was ceded, but it was ceded as it was negotiations between two nations. You know, it wasn't. We didn't lose no war. There was no actual war, and if you really want to look back into history, First Nations are the only people to unilaterally defeat the United States in their own territory as well as Canada. So if anybody won or lost a war legally, it was Canada and the United States. So there was no actual war that was won or lost. It was nation-to-nation agreements on land, economy, you know, social services, all that. And if you're going to follow and respect that a little more, then you have to follow and respect that First Nations people are sovereign. So that's it.
It's your piece.
That's my piece. Thanks.
I just wanted to sort of add on to what Shady was saying there, that in my opinion, I think all these bills, this omnibus bill that has been passed, it kind of, in my opinion, it shows Stephen's Harper agenda when it comes to First Nations people, and which is one of assimilation or eradication, especially when we were promised sovereignty. I don't know if anybody saw or heard of Russell Daibo, but there was a video that explains the Indian Act and sort of the history behind it. And as Shady was saying, that the Indian Act is a racist, very racist piece of legislation that, in my opinion as well, it should be removed. But we get to, as nation-to-nation basis, we get to decide how that gets removed and what it gets replaced with.
We call the shots basically on how it's going to
Yeah, because we're the
veto
ones.
power.
Yeah, we're the ones that have to deal with it, right? And in 1982, when the Constitution was written, it was Section 35 that was supposed to be, an acknowledgement of our rights. And although it wasn't necessarily describing what our rights would be, that was supposed to be talked about, I think, at the Charlottetown Accord, but that fell apart, and nobody knows exactly what our rights are now. However, I feel that, as this issue has come into light, I think we should push for an expansion on what Section 35 really means, and use that as a replacement for the Indian Act. However, Harper is attacking Section 35 as well, trying to get rid of that. There's these what Russell Daibo described as results-based approach to these tables that he comes to First Nations communities and says, okay, let's talk about your self-governing. But to even talk about that, you have to give up your Section 35 rights. And that's my understanding of what Russell Daibo was saying.
See the guy that wrote the article about the termination plan?
I'm not sure exactly.
That was the first time I heard about the new policies, what the government was going to do.
Yeah.
We're at home warrants.
I'm not sure. I saw the video.
Okay, I'll look it up.
Yeah, if you Google Russell Daibo Indian Act, it should show up. But
Just one more thing also. One thing to put stuff into context here is, because I find it's hard for people of other ethnic backgrounds to understand why First Nations people are always so pissed off. And we're in 2013, we're in Canada, modern society, a civilized country, yet we're still making laws that target specific ethnic races and racial groups. And I always ask people, how would you feel if instead of Bill C-27, First Nations Financial Transparency Act, it said C-27, Caucasian Financial Transparency Act, or Black Financial Transparency Act, or Middle Eastern Financial Transparency Act, when you're targeting a specific race? People would not feel very good about that, and it's systematic racism still happening in 2013. It's ridiculous. I mean, I don't like the fact that they specify and they target specific racial groups. I don't like the fact that it's not somebody who is First Nations that is doing that. Just like Aboriginal Affairs, it's somebody who is not First Nations who is sitting there with a stamp saying, okay, Indian, approved. Indian, approved. Not Indian, you're out. Indian, approved. It's like, come on, man. It doesn't make any sense. We should have control over our own laws, our own membership for our communities. We should be deciding who is Indian and who is not Indian, because it's not based on bloodline, it's based on your community and who accepts you as a member of that community and who isn't a member of that community. People are arguing with me about that too, but I mean, traditionally, you go back 200 years ago, we wouldn't be like, oh, you got blue eyes and blonde hair, you're not a member of our community. If you were related to every person in that community, you were a child of someone from that community, and even if you weren't from that community and we accepted you as a brother or a sister, you became us. You became who we are.
that happens today on smaller groups as well.
Mhm.
Like some of my cousins aren't blood cousins, but they are cousins, And people who get married in, they're accepted and they're part of that family.
And that's what the government doesn't understand.
Yeah.
Because they can't see it from our perspective. They can't see it from our there's indigenous knowledge and spirituality, and just indigenous thinking is different. It's just, you're born with it. It's a whole different mindset, and people who aren't indigenous just can't make laws because you don't understand what we think and how we understand the world and see the world. But you can support us. Not saying that.
It needs to be respected,
Yeah.
as we would respect you for your culture.
Yeah.
One of my really good friends, who's totally behind the Autonomy movement, he says the best way you can support someone is to stand behind them. Don't stand in front of them. Don't hold the megaphone for your face to speak for them, but stand behind them. in support, because that's what we need right now. We have our own voices. We have our demands, and we're very capable, of doing things for ourselves. But like every major movement out there, it's not going to get solved just with the minority group within itself, because let's face it, the government really doesn't care about Aboriginal people, and once they see that there's more than just Aboriginal people standing alongside us, then they're more likely to do something. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So basically, my name is Gabrielle Castilloux. I'm a third-year social work student here at Carleton. My mother is Algonquin and Jewish and Scottish and French and a bunch of wonderful things. And my father is Mi'kmaq. I have a lot of family from the Listugush, which is in Gaspé, as well as Mi'kmaqs of Gaspé. So from one of the 7 districts down on the east coast in Quebec. I'm not from that reserve. I was not, nobody knows me on that reserve. People know my father, people know my grandparents really, really, really well. But one of the reasons why I'm not getting funded for post-secondary education is because they don't know me as much as they would like to. And that's one of the, and that has been my baby since first year university, is tuition fees. I hate them. I think they should be gone. I can quote you facts and statistics about our economy and how if we paid more taxes, or if the government actually properly taxed corporations, our tuition fees as well as so many more things would be exponentially better. So that's what and I'm in social work. I don't know, a lot of people say I should be in economics or something, but I'm in social work. And yeah, it's one of the things that I fight for the most. I'll probably be at every single Drop Fees rally you've heard of. And that's one of the reasons why I dove head on into the I Don't Know More student movement, because post-secondary education in regards to the treaties is something that the government's also not respecting. I mean, we're supposed to have a certain amount of funding to be able to send Aboriginal people to universities, and that funding is just not there. So for example, if from your community, if no one goes to a post-secondary education for like 10 years, the money gets put somewhere else, or you just don't get that money because when you hand in your receipts and everything, like if it's just not there, no one's going to university, you're not going to get that funding. And then out of nowhere, after 10 years, if 7 people want to go to a university, it might not happen, and they might only get a certain amount. And then what they might have to do is split that amount 7 ways. So they might get a little bit of funding, or they might pick and choose, like, okay, you two, you're the 2 most well-known people, or however that community decides to pick. They might say, we can only fully fund you 2, and the rest of you, I'm sorry. So it depends on the community, and it's sometimes there is a little bit of mismanagement for money. Like not everyone is a genius when it comes to budgeting, but sometimes most of the time, in most cases, it really is the government's fault. There really is a lot of funding problems. The biggest issue is the 2% cap that the government placed on post-secondary funding, and basically it's really horrible because, for example, 2 years ago, 19,000 Aboriginal people did not get funded for post-secondary education, and that means training colleges, universities, they just did not get that funding. And if you look at the percentage of people that have bachelor's degrees or higher that are Indigenous versus non-Indigenous, the percentages are ridiculous. For ages 25 to 65, there's only 4% of the Indigenous population that has a bachelor's degree or higher versus 23% of Canadians. So there's a lot of problems, there's a lot of issues, and the reason why I'm behind it is because I would love to see a day where we did not have tuition fees at all, or at least drastically reduced to something manageable, because I work 3 jobs to pay $7 grand a year, which is a lot of money for me, and a lot of other students. So basically what the I Don't Know More student movement is doing is it's a collection of universities and colleges all across Canada that are standing in solidarity with I Don't Know More. Right now there's York, Trent, us, Ottawa U, Algonquin College, University of Quebec, Concordia. There's a lot. There was supposed to be a website put up yesterday, but we're having problems. And each university, on top of the fact that they're demanding that post-secondary rights be respected for Indigenous students, we're also asking for lower tuition fees for all students. And every single university or college is making specific demands of their administration. So in your hands you have this lovely little document with the 4 demands that Carleton University made of its administration. And basically we want a mandatory training program for all staff and faculty to be like created and implemented starting this year. And it will always, like, there will continuously be this training. Like, this training is not like we're going to train everybody by the end of the year. Like, we understand there's a lot of faculty and staff, and there will always be new staff, and there was always going to be new things to add into this training program. But we want it created and like handed over, and we want people to start getting trained by the end of this year. And it's really great because we have a Carleton I always say Carleton Academic, but it's the Center for Aboriginal Culture and Education through administration that already started a mock-up of this last year in response to a documentary created, Aboriginal Issues in the Classroom. Because a lot of Indigenous students, like I've been subjected to this. I went to class one day and a professor was talking, and it was a political economy class, and he was just talking and he was like, damn taxes, too bad I'm not native, and then he just kept going, and I was just like, really? Like, I don't expect this from an economics professor. Like, I expect you to know that, you know, if the fact we're not getting taxed is because we're on Crown land and the Crown finds it stupid to tax itself because it's not really ours, it's theirs, and you know, so many other reasons. And other students like that are afraid to, you know, voice their opinions or say things because they're like, you know, my professor really doesn't know what's going on, or someone else in the back just said that, you know, all natives are drunks, which is completely horrible and not true. So we want that training program created. We want professors and staff to know, like, actually, like, this is the real fact, and please don't say that in my class ever again. Thank you so much. You know, have a great day. So that's one of our demands. The second one is that we currently as a university don't have a major in Indigenous studies. A lot of other universities and colleges do. I've had friends who didn't come to Carleton because there wasn't a major in Indigenous studies. They went to Ottawa U instead, or another university. And a lot of students are interested in having one here, so we want one as well. And we also want a flag in the atrium as well as outside the atrium where the Canadian flagpole is. And we don't know exactly which flag we want yet. We're gonna sit down. We're gonna have like we're gonna have to talk to a lot of people. And it doesn't always have to be this one flag forever. You know, we can change the flags. You know, like this year if we want to have the I Don't Know More flag up there, and then next year we find that there's a better flag to represent Aboriginal students on campus, we'll have that one instead. But we want a flag in the atrium and outside where the Canadian flag is, and we want whichever flag that the Indigenous students on campus decide, that flag just stays there, and it's permanent, and it's in equal prominence with the Canadian flag. Because, I mean, like, we are currently standing on unceded Algonquin territory, and our university is doing little steps to clarify that, but not enough. And so that's one of the fourth demand is that we want it stated on the Carleton University homepage, like, so that, like, literally you click Carleton University and, like, it's right there in your face. Like, Carleton University is, you know, currently built on unceded Algonquin territory, you know, to have, and like hopefully like a link, so you click that and then it just gives you a little bit more information. That would be really great. And I met with the administration on Monday, met with several people from the Aboriginal Task Force here on campus, which is like comprised of a lot of Indigenous staff, student leaders, people from administration, and all of these four demands look really great in their eyes, and they want them met very soon. And like, we don't have a timeline yet. I'm going to push for a timeline because we all know with the admin, if they say it's going to be done by March, it's actually going to be done next September. But anyways, we're really going to try, and things are looking good in our respects. As far as you know, getting involved, if you ever checked out First Peoples Council on Facebook, I'm on it like 17 times a day, like just posting stuff about what's happening at current events, and it's a really great resource that way. But yeah, for me personally, like my goal with this is, I'm 21 years old and I'm already fed up, and you know I'm very young, but at this point I've been through, I would like to say, over 30 to 50 protests. I've been on Parliament Hill way too many times for way too many things, and I Don't Know More is one of the things that has given me the most encouragement. I mean, like the first event that I went to was on December 21st, and when I marched with thousands of Yeah, with like thousands of people in a snowstorm, and like it was like you couldn't even see 10 feet in front of you because it was snowing so heavily, and people were shaking, and like people you didn't even know were like, hey, can I hug you for warmth, and I'll help you hold your banner, and like, you know what I mean? Like it was absolutely, like, for me, the most encouraging day of my life, to see all these people just there, just, you know, let's do a peaceful protest, let's say enough is enough. And since then I've gone to almost every event that I could go to, and it's just been so inspirational for me, and I would really like, a lot of people are like, oh, because for those of you that don't know, Chief Teresa Spence finished her hunger strike yesterday, so that's 44 days of a hunger strike, and there's other people that are gonna, you know, keep holding up the torch for her, that are gonna continue their hunger strikes, or that are gonna start a hunger strike. So the fight's not over. But a lot of people like tweeted at me last night. They're like, okay, so it's done now? I Don't Know More is done now? And I was like, no, it's not. I Don't Know More is not going to be done for like my life. Like my life. It's something that I think should continue for generations to come. I do hope, though, that the things we're asking for, like better dialogue, and like just the end right here, like the Aboriginal students of Carleton University and their allies stand in solidarity with the I Don't Know More movement, and will continue to fight for our rights until the government fully respects post-secondary rights for Aboriginal peoples in accordance to the treaties, and that our demands for more dialogue between Aboriginal peoples and the government be created permanently, and that bills affecting Aboriginal peoples that have already passed be rescinded, and that future bills not be passed without the free, informed consultation and consent of Aboriginal peoples. So like that, I hope that gets solved as soon as possible. Let's be realistic, though. It's the government we're dealing with. You know, movements don't happen overnight. They don't get solved overnight. I wish they did. But I think I Don't Know More is a thing that's going to continue for a long time, and it's going to be a good thing for a long time, because I think it's about time that, you know, enough is enough. Like Shady said, it's 2013. Like, this is ridiculous. And you know, since 1867, we've had to, since before 1867, but like the fact that the history books say that, you know, 1867 is when this country started, like that just makes me really angry.
We've been protesting since 1496.
What was it? Homeland Security since like 1496 or something?
Let's say 1492, because that's when Christopher.
Oh,
but then we were here
1492,
before
yeah.
that, because there's people. There's like.
Yeah, the Vikings were here before that.
Yeah, we protested that.
The Vikings left because my people scared them.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a,
we're just political people. We can't escape it. It just
No.
keeps following us wherever we go.
Yeah. But yeah, like it's just I think it's really wonderful, and again, when people say it's not organized, like who's the judge of that? Like
Yeah.
I say, who, like really, like what do you mean you want organized? Do you want us like marching in like military rows down, like so many people have said that it's not organized. I'm like, what's your definition of organization?
Once we organize
like,
it, they're gonna start calling us a terrorist organization,
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
like they did with the
like-
African National Congress or the IRA. They're gonna start saying, "Oh, now these protesters are organized. Holy shit, they're
like,
terrorists."
because I got interviewed a couple days ago, and they were like, "How are you organized?" I was like, "What do you mean organized? I just check Facebook every day, and I see a new event, and I just go to it." And then they were like, "Well, like nobody, like there's no formal structure," and they're like, "What's your title?" That was the thing that bothered me the most. They're like, "What is your title?" I was like, "Well, like I'm a student at Carleton, like I'm involved in First Peoples Council." They're like, "No, like you have to have a title." I was like, "I'm with I Don't Know More. Like, what more title do you want?" And like, it's just just white people. Like, I love you all, but like, we think things differently. But yeah, it's, but yeah, I could talk a lot, but I'd rather have this be like a dialogue of sorts. So if
And
people,
just
yeah.
one more thing also to add on. To me, I Don't Know More is about not just about the issues, but about educating Canadians about the issues. To be honest, I didn't really support the movement at the beginning. I wasn't very. For me personally, I've always liked looking inside before we look out. That's the kind of person I've always been, and I was kind of skeptical of it at first. And I did reading, and I attended some meetings, and I talked to people. And what really got me going was when I faced ignorance. Just pure ignorance, and people who weren't educated about the issues. And I was speaking about, and I still hadn't really supported the movement yet. And I was speaking just about the bill and about consultations. I mean, somebody, I was leaving a meeting, and I don't even recall what the statement was, but it was just an ignorant statement, and I had never heard something like that on top of that, it wasn't you know, a Caucasian person, it was an ethnic person, and somebody whose race was oppressed at one time in history. And they said something really ignorant. I don't like using the word racist either, but they said something really stupid to me, I'll just say that, and it really put things into perspective. I was like, wow, people really don't know what they're talking about in this country. They don't understand the issues, and they don't understand the history, the context, anything. They just don't get it. And so then I started sitting down and reading about more stuff, and then I supported the movement after that. I supported the cause. At the beginning of it, I was more interested in doing more action for my community specifically, and addressing the. I wanted to really go after the corporations in my community who are destroying the lumber and not giving us anything from that destruction. I mean, you know, if you're going to destroy everything and you don't want us to stop it, at least give us a percentage of it. You know, but they don't want to do anything. They want to just destroy it, not give us anything, and then when we do try and stop them from destroying it, we get tossed in jail. So that was my focus at the time. It wasn't so much the federal government. But again, like I say, with all Canadians, study, read about it, learn about it, and then, you know, if you don't support it, I'm sure your mindset will change once you really read about it and learn about it. Just like myself, my mindset changed like overnight. I was neutral on it. Sorry, I said I didn't support. I was just neutral on it, and I went to being, you know, now I'm speaking engagements about it, and talking about I don't know more and all that. But it's not so much. It's this indigenous movement, and it hasn't just been happening now. And people are learning about it now, but it's been happening, like I said, since Columbus landed. We've been fighting, and we've been angry, and we've been upset because our voices aren't being heard. You know, and it's only when drastic stuff happens that people seem to listen. I mean, the last time you really heard much, you know, Oka. From Oka till now, there hasn't really been much coverage about Indigenous issues, unless it's criticizing Indigenous people. But Oka till now, and prior to Oka, it was 1972 Wounded Knee in the States. So like all these big gaps, and it takes something huge and drastic to get attention of people. But when we're just, you know, rotting away, nobody cares. The media is not there. It's only when we finally stand up and say we're sick of it, we're sick of rotting, and we're sick of the mistreatment. And people say, I hear this criticism a lot is, why can't we just all be equal? Why do the natives get this? It's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair. We're not equal. We're under you guys by so much. How can people even say, why don't you want to be equal? Well, we do want to be equal. We want to go from here to here. But to say we're like this is not true. We're not getting more than you. Why can't I drink water out of my tap at my home in my community? Why is it when I shower I smell worse than when I got into the shower? Well, why is that? Is that equal? Is that what you face in Ottawa? Is that what you face in Toronto? No. So where's the equality in that? You know, why is it northern communities are paying $10 for a thing of toast and you're paying $4 something, $3 something in Ottawa? You know, it doesn't make sense. Why do some communities not have roads to get into them? You know, it's crazy. Why do some communities have 90% dependency rate on drugs and alcohol? It doesn't. There is no equality. So if you guys ever do hear somebody say, "I wish First Nations just wanted to be equal with this and it's not fair," say that they're not equal. They're under us, not over us. And the money we get in comparison to all the other federal budgets out there is squat. You look at the military budget compared to First Nations budget, and what wars are we fighting in that we're spending so much money? I mean, you know, I don't get it. Yet there's a war going on right here. First Nations people are sick, and they've been fighting. They've been fighting for such a long time, and no money is being put to help that. No money is being put to solve that issue. We care more about what's going on overseas than what's going on right here in our own home. We care more about the poor people in Afghanistan and in Iraq and in Haiti than we care about the poor people here in this country. And, you know, I'm not saying don't care about them, but I'm saying, you know, if we can give billions over there, we can give billions here. There's people here that are sick, that are dying. There's children who are poor. There's children who are freezing cold in crappy houses. Whether or not that's the fault of the community, it doesn't matter. Do you think Does anybody ask that question about Afghanistan? Is it the fault of the people in Afghanistan why that stuff happened? Are they accountable for their actions? Are the government in Haiti, are they accountable for their actions? You know, whether or not they're accountable, it doesn't matter. People are hungry, people are starving, people are dying, just like here, and they need help, and they need assistance, and this is not assistance. This legislation is not assistance at all. Whoever's fault it is, you know, but.
One thing you got me thinking about was how people really always criticize the money thing and saying like, what more do they want now? Don't they have enough? You know, and there's this general assumption that there is like massive amounts of money being thrown at people that they have more per capita. And I think that's when people don't do the math. They don't realize, okay, take any individual in a city, divide all the money provided provincially, municipally, and federally, and find out how much money each costs. And then also, if you criticize, and then another thing, just I don't want to talk too long, because I want to talk for probably should be talking. How the crime bills that got passed, like the Omnibus crime bill that got passed not too long ago, puts a lot of other people in jail for menial terms, and that costs like $88,000 a year to keep somebody in prison.
Yeah,
you don't hear people complaining about that. It doesn't cost $88,000 to send somebody to school for a year. You know, so it's like, and also I work in the military, and I've never seen so much waste. Like we're burning all our garbage over there. One guy was handing out stuff in Afghanistan. He said he gave a kid a glue stick for crafts, and the kid ate it. You know, it's like so it's like we're spending money on things, but we're trying. Sometimes it doesn't really get there. So it's like we should really, if we're going to criticize stuff, criticize everything equally. You know, like,
that's it. And even for our own people, I say if we're going to criticize the feds, we have to criticize ourselves too.
Yeah.
I mean, scrutinizing things is always good. You have to scrutinize things, and you know, there's problems on both sides, and that's what both sides have to understand equally. First Nations people have to understand that, you know what, federal government, they're human beings too, they make mistakes. And then federal government needs to understand that we're human beings and we make mistakes too, you know. Everybody makes mistakes, but I don't think a majority of First Nations are deliberately mismanaging money. And that's where there's another misconception, is that First Nations are doing it on purpose.
You make us ward of the states in the first place, and you treat us like kids. You treat them like kids. And then when they do mishandle money, you criticize them, but you can't expect them to know if you haven't educated them, and if you treat them like kids, they're not going to learn how to do things properly, I guess.
I know, I think a lot of this too, I don't know, we haven't talked about it a whole bunch, but a lot of it is like that a lot of criticisms or understandings are made without a lack of historical context at all. And like I see here on the paper that some allies and stuff wrote settler, and for me that was a really big deal, acknowledging like, whoa, like we are all settlers here, like we are the straight, like, you know, as a settler, you know, realizing that, making that step. So I think it's great that I Don't Know More is really like brought forward that kind of language and made it more mainstream for people to acknowledge, like, that they, you know, for people who are settlers here, that they are settlers, and a lot of these policies are informed on the fact that, you know, based on the fact that people don't acknowledge that. So when you're like, our country, it's like looking at language like that and thinking like, is it really? Okay, like let's think about how Canada, you know, was here, and using words to, at least for me, to identify as a settler was like my big first important step. And I'm like, that's really important when you want to be an ally, to know and acknowledge that in everything, I think. And like that, I'm really happy that you said that you were like, so we're on unsurrendered land, and like not everything, there's unresolved treaties all over this country, and crossing borders as well, and then there's land that was just taken straight up without any manipulation and law and all of these things. And anyways, it's important to acknowledge that there's all of these different things going on. It's, yeah. I just wanted to say, for me, like that was learning if you talk, for me, talking to folks too and being like, oh, you live in Toronto, do you know what territory you're on? And kind of informing people about where they're, like what land they're organizing or doing whatever on is a really big deal. And I think it's great that this kind of like this I Don't Know More is pushing forward that kind of understanding, and at least history too.
I like the how you mentioned the word settler, because I mean, like a year or two ago you didn't hear that word going around too much, and I really enjoy the look on some people's faces when you do call them a settler, because it's like,
I'm trying to figure out if it's an insult or not.
It's like I called somebody like it's like I called somebody a racially filled term or something. It's like, I said it one time, people get mad, they're like, I'm not a settler, I was born here. And it's like,
That
you know,
means you are a settler.
but that term is meant it's meant to hit something. It's meant to be like, oh, what? This isn't my, I'm not from here. And again, I don't also like using the term my or our land, because as First Nations people, I don't think that we should be saying our land. It is everyone's land. I mean, in our teachings, the Creator gave it to everybody to live on and to sustain themselves on, but not to like destroy each other on. You know what I mean? But yeah, I really enjoy the term because it puts things in perspective for people now. People have to actually go home and think about that. Why did somebody call me a settler today? Like, what's the reason behind that? Why? I was born here. Why am I a settler? And it's like, and they think about it, and it creates conversation in people's own heads as to why they're being called a certain thing, and it's good to kind of like the Ottawapiskat hashtag. I find that hilarious. Like, it was awesome. It's switching the role on people. It's like, you know, we get called this or we get called that, and people judge us and criticize us. It's like, what if we just flip the tables and do it back? How would you like that? Like, in my class yesterday, there was a book, Indigenous Studies class, and it's a Thomas King book, and in one of the stories, it's about child adoption and stuff. And what happens when the First Nations family tries to go adopt a non-First Nations kid? Whether or not they're a good, let's say they're a good family, they're more likely to get turned down than a non-Caucasian family, than a Caucasian family, which is, I find that hilarious. How many, you know, I know a lot of First Nations kids are put up for adoption, but how many First Nations families are actually adopting kids? And, you know, there are a lot of good families out there who need children, who want to adopt children, and it's like reversing the roles, and people don't ever question that or think about that, you know? Why do, let's say, First Nations kids, when they're put up for adoption, why aren't they put up for adoption back in their community to a family who can take them in? Why are they sent off like 10 hours away?
The 60s scoop never ended.
It never ended. It still goes on. In my community, personal story, my little cousin, her family was having a hard time. CAS came in, took the child. Now, my mother and my grandmother are registered to take in children. When, you know, situations like that arise in the community. Now, instead of that little baby and another little older toddler being put with family members who can take care of them and, you know, and take care of the situation until everything's resolved, they sent the kid, we're a English speaking community, and they sent that kid to a French speaking community, the two kids. Right, they don't understand French, they don't speak French. I mean, one was too small to even talk, but the other one could talk. And now she's going to a community where everyone is French and she doesn't understand anything. Instead of just putting the kid in a community where they can, you know, still hold on to their culture and their family values and their people. And that's just an example. It still happens. They still are trying to separate and break up our families and their culture through these systems that they impose in our communities. It hasn't gone away. It's still there. They're still trying to kill our culture, and our language and our people. They don't, like, you know, the government talks so much saying we support this, we support that, we want Indigenous people to do this, we want Aboriginal people to do that. At the high school on my reserve, they only offer the language, the Anishinaabe language, up until grade 6. After that, there's not enough funding to keep it going. What's the point of teaching a kid to speak the language until grade 6 and then he forgets it after that? You know, it's a waste of money if you're just going to teach the person to speak the language for 6 years and then just drop it on them like that and send them into an English-speaking world. So I hear lies from the government all the time.
I think it's a start. I mean, back when I was a kid, there was nothing that was offered like that.
Yeah.
I don't know my language at all. But I think you were going to say something?
I was wondering about something. In the summer, I did a placement at the National Association of Friendship Centers, the national office. And I got to know a fair amount about urban Aboriginal people, not simply First Nations, but also Métis and Inuit. And with the rise of Idle No More, the thing that I've been really wondering about is, does it address the situation of Aboriginal people who live in the cities? and particularly because the statistics that we had and the expectations for the results of the current census is that a majority, somewhere in the neighborhood, 55, 60, 65% of all Aboriginal people will be living in the cities, and that the friendship centers themselves are the, I'm a social worker too, our social service agencies on incredibly reduced budgets.
Yeah, I used to work at Odawa, and I was on the OFIFC board before. It's crazy.
And so I was just wondering, because the very real concrete concerns of Aboriginal people, not simply First Nations within, but also Inuit and Métis. So I'm just wondering how it addresses this.
Well, like myself and my grandmother are very much involved with the Castilloux, which is in Ottawa. It's an off-reserve community, and they fully stand behind I Don't Know More. And although like some of the bills don't affect Indians who are off-reserve Indians, like the ones that are not from a specific reserve, and there are so many other bills that affect everyone else, that not just, you know, First Nations individuals or Aboriginal people, but, you know, everyone as a whole. And for me, it's more the fact that like there's just we're just targeting so many things, because like you can't fix something and then expect everything to follow. Okay, like you have to fix everything at like simultaneously. Like I could show you examples and I could go on for a while, but like for me, like for every single person that I've met, I haven't been able to be like, I Don't Know More is not for you. You know, I Don't Know More is for everyone. You know, regardless of wherever you're from or what situation. I don't know if that's what you were asking, because like for me it sounded like you were like specifically more to like urban Aboriginal
I'm just
people.
wondering that within the rise of the I Don't Know More movement, and I'm certainly very aware of the situation of urban Aboriginal people, and I was just wondering, I mean, I understand the profound wrong that has been done, and and this is a reaction in many ways to that, but I was just wondering where it fit.
Well, I think what you see right now, if you see I Don't Know More, you're seeing there is a division between the chiefs and the people. And I think that speaks directly to the fact that the chiefs are only representing on-reserve people. And that, personally, I don't think they like the fact that people off-reserve are now having a larger voice than them, because they represent the minority.
And they now have a legal right too.
Exactly.
As of what, a week ago, Métis and non-status Indians are now the responsibility of the federal government.
And I think at the beginning of I Don't Know More, it kind of started off as mostly a First Nations thing, you know, and now I think it's become a lot more inclusive of Métis and Inuit people. Like I don't think it's still yet addressing, let's say, Inuit specific issues. I don't think it's targeting those things, or Métis specific issues. I don't think it's yet to like look at those, because it does and it doesn't, because I Don't Know More, their two main mandates are, you know, treaty respect and protecting the environment. So protecting the environment, obviously anybody, you know, but the treaty respect also, we're all treaty people, so it does affect everybody, but it's not addressing like specific issues that affect, let's say, you know, people in the north, you know, issues in the north. But it could, because it's a grassroots movement. It's not organized, so anything could be addressed in there, right? But I am seeing right now a lot more participation from specifically Inuit people than I did see at the beginning. There is a lot more at first, because there's always this, I find Inuit people feel left out a lot of times, like they're not part of the discussion about Aboriginal people, and that there's a big divide between First Nations and Inuit people that we like. They are very different, same but different at the same time. And I know in the cities, a lot of Inuit people often feel left out at Aboriginal gatherings because there's not enough, you know. Inuit, I don't really know too much about their culture either, but there's not much. You know, Inuit inclusion that I find. But what I am saying, what I Don't Know More now, is a lot more participation for Inuit people. And but it's become like a world thing now, right? So it's not even just. I don't think it's a First Nations thing anymore. I think it's become larger than that. It's I've seen it become everybody. But the fact that chiefs are upset about certain things, I think it has to do with the fact that urban Aboriginals are having a voice now. And you saw that divide even when the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples and the Assembly of First Nations never liked each other. And there's all kinds of reasons for that, but one of the main ones is that the event only represents on reserve people, not even status, like they represent status people, but you have to be status living on reserve. Status off reserve, that at one time that went to the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples, not anymore though. I think that now it's just non-status that they represent. But I think the I Don't Know More movement has become a lot bigger off reserve than it is on reserve.
And I think that's a good thing too, because in my experience, I'm an urban Aboriginal person, and up until I heard of I Don't Know More, I felt disconnected from my culture and my people and my land even. I mean, I know where I come from, but being surrounded in the city, not a lot of people, that sort of share the same mind state. I didn't know where I stood on a lot of these issues, and then this comes into place, and then you see, I guess, the native people in the cities come out of hiding, and I can relate to what they're saying and what they're doing. I remember growing up, and I would be the target of a lot of people's stupid opinions and everything like that, and it started this fire in me, like, and I thought it was a bad thing for a long time, but after seeing the uprising of different Aboriginal nations, that fire was in a lot of people, and now I'm kind of realizing that's not a bad thing. It's something that we all feel because history runs deep, and now I can say, because of I Don't Know More, I'm a little bit more knowledgeable of my history, of my culture, and it's inspired me to become involved in, I guess, in my culture.
So I have a couple of upcoming events. Sorry, I read the description. It was learn about I Don't Know More and how you can be involved and stuff. And I was like, well, there's events happening, so that's ways people can get involved. So tomorrow there's going to be an I Don't Know More grassroots youth conference at the Ottawa Convention Center from 9 to 5. The suggested age is 13 to 30. However, if you're over 30 or under 13, we're not going to turn you away. We're not going to be like, nope, you're too old, you're too young. It doesn't matter. Everyone is welcome. There's going to be a lot of discussions about environment and education and activism as a whole. And Maud Barlow is going to be there, and Clayton Thomas Muller, and just a lot of really, really awesome people that I've met and that if you would like to meet and talk to. Really great opportunity. This Monday, January 28th, is going to be the biggest I Don't Know More. It's the day of action. I heard crazy things there's going to be 40,000 people on the hill, and people are going to bring their trailers and tents. And
this is on the Monday?
This is this Monday. Yeah, people are going to bring their trailers and tents. There's also a big call up for jingle dress dancers all across the nation. The last I checked the page, there's going to be over 2,000 of us dancing on the hill, just to try to heal the nation, and just it's gonna be. I can't wait for Monday. I think I'm just gonna be blown away.
Is there a specific place that one can go find these events?
Facebook.
Yeah.
The one for Monday, it's called J28. Yeah, it's Unity #J28 Ottawa. And then basically, the schedule right now is that 11 a.m. you meet at Victoria Island at the Sacred Fire of the Algonquins. And then at 11:10, we'll assemble on Wallington in the eastbound lanes and march towards Parliament Hill. At 11:20, we meet up with the grandfather drums and the jingle dress dancers. Wait, what does that mean? What do you mean meet up? What does that mean that I have to go? Okay, I'll figure it out. Okay, and then
starts at Victoria Island though.
Yeah.
At 11.
Does that mean we're already going to be on the hill? I think. Okay, anyways, I will figure that out for myself. And then noon, you arrive at Parliament Hill with the jingle dress dancers in The lead, this is a very long schedule. But yeah, 11 Victoria Island. And then
Until
4 p.m. end of the day. But like you don't have to stay from like 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's long, it's cold. You probably, if you want to dance, you'll probably be warmer. But if you're not dancing and you're just walking, you might not be as warm. But yeah, it's gonna be insane. I just heard that people are gonna be like parking their trailers up there and just staying there. You know, and just wonderful things like that. But it's yeah, and if ever you want to get involved, like please message me. Like I'm in desperate need of volunteers. I've been doing the I don't know more table in the atrium, and I've been doing it for like 45 minutes at a time, and then like packing it up and like going to go eat and then setting it back up, and it's yeah. So if you ever just want to help out, just message firstpeoplescouncil@hotmail.com. You know, Shady and Castilloux always need volunteers at the Aboriginal Service Center for lots of events, not just I don't know more.
Well, we're pretty much tapped out for events for the month. We just finished our last one yesterday, but next week there is a Human Library on the 28th. That's Tuesday?
Yeah.
Tuesday, yeah.
And 5 p.m. in Bakers.
Bakers.
4th floor atrium.
And February 2nd,
University Center.
there's
Round
our
dance.
annual round dance and the gym somewhere, one of the gyms here. If you go to the athletic facility, you'll find us there. So
There's also a documentary on, is it on Ottawa Piscat or Ganawagi?
Piscat.
Ottawa Piscat. At 5 p.m. in the River Building on Monday. See, we're just like libraries of like resources of like what's happening on campus. But literally, First People's Council page on Facebook, like every time I get an email about something or an event is happening, or probably twice a day, I'll be like, who wants to help me? So yeah, just go on that. If you don't have Facebook, I can send you emails. I can add you to the email list. But yeah, there's definitely lots of things you can do to help out. Like right now, you can sign this wonderful banner that we are going to be carrying on the 28th. Just write stuff like your name or support for I Don't Know More. It's a small thing, but it goes a long way. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Yeah,
Me.
thank you. But I also wanted to touch on that. You know, if you're an organizer, you know, you're able to host your own teach-ins. I mean, I came to OPIRG and said, hey, I want to do this, and you know, there's this happening, right? So there's ways to do that. You can go to rallies. My biggest recommendation is read the Royal Commission of Aboriginal People and the UN Charter of Rights of Indigenous People if you want to learn more. And education is, you know, the best weapon to fight this. And
don't read the whole commission though, because
it's heavy. I'm still on volume 1. Yeah, I'm still on volume 1, and I started around Christmas time.
Read like a overview of it.
Sparks notes.
And like I said, Russell Dibo, his video, he's got some really good things to talk about, and so does Pam Polymer. I don't know what your opinion is on her or anything, but she does bring up some good, valid points. If you're Aboriginal, you can, you know, go out and learn your culture, seek the elders, the old traditions and ceremonies, go to powwows, learn the history of your reserves, etc., etc. For non-Aboriginals, you know, learn why I Don't Know More is important and how it does affect you, because it affects everybody. And think critically about Native stereotypes. I think that's a big